Have you ever looked up at the sky and wondered how many different airlines are actually flying above you right now? Because at any single moment, thousands of aircraft from hundreds of countries are moving across invisible highways in the air, carrying millions of passengers and tons of cargo, connecting cities, cultures, economies, and lives together. And today, how many airlines truly exist on Earth, and why? The answer is far more complicated than just a number. Because aviation is not only about big famous airlines like Emirates, Qatar Airways, American Airlines, or British Airways, but also about tiny regional carriers, cargo operators, charter companies, private jet fleets, government transport units, and even airlines that exist only seasonally. So when people ask how many airlines exist, the simple answer they expect might be a few hundred, but the real answer reveals the enormous scale of global aviation. Because, according to international aviation databases and civil aviation authorities, there are over 5,000 registered airline operators worldwide, yet only around 700 to 800 are what we call scheduled passenger airlines, meaning airlines you can actually book tickets with online, while the remaining thousands operate in specialized sectors, like cargo, air taxi, air ambulance, military contract flights, offshore oil transport, mountain rescue flights, polar supply routes, and remote island connections, which means aviation is much bigger than commercial travel alone. And to understand why this number keeps changing, every year we must understand the life cycle of an airline, because airlines are constantly being born, merging, rebranding, collapsing, restarting, or transforming due to fuel prices, economic crises, pandemics, tourism, demand, and government policies. For example, during COVID-19, more than 40 airlines disappeared permanently, while new low-cost carriers launched shortly after, proving aviation never stops evolving. And if we divide airlines by category, the world becomes even more interesting, because there are full-service global airlines that operate fleets, low-cost carriers that revolutionized affordable travel, regional airlines connecting small cities, cargo giants like FedEx and UPS, moving global trade, charter airlines serving holiday destinations, business jet operators transporting executives and government, state airlines flying presidents and royal families. Each type counts as an airline, yet they operate under completely different business models and regulations. And this is why aviation experts rarely agree on a single exact number, because counting airlines depends on what you include. Do you count inactive certificates, seasonal operators, subsidiaries, or brands? Under parent companies, for example, Lufthansa Group alone includes Lufthansa Swiss, Austrian Airlines, Brussels Airlines, Eurowings, and several smaller regional partners, meaning one corporate group represents multiple airlines. Similarly, American Airlines owns regional brands like Envoy Air and PSA Airlines, while Air France Group manages multiple subsidiaries across Europe and beyond. So the sky is not just crowded with airplanes, but with complex organizational structures. And another reason the number is so high is geography, because countries with large land areas like the United States, Canada, Russia, and Australia require hundreds of regional carriers to connect remote communities where roads or railways cannot reach, while island nations like Indonesia, Philippines, and the Caribbean depend heavily on aviation as primary transportation, leading to dozens of small domestic airlines operating short routes, sometimes just 20 minutes long. And in Africa, bush airlines land on dirt runways, delivering supplies to wildlife reserves, while in Alaska, aircraft replace buses delivering mail, grocers, and medicine to villages where no highways exist, showing aviation is not luxury but lifeline. And if we go even deeper into cargo aviation, we discover a hidden world most passengers never notice, because for every passenger aircraft you see at an airport, another freighter may depart at midnight carrying electronics, medicines, live animals, and e-commerce packages, and thousands of cargo operators exist globally, many without public booking systems, yet fully certified airlines, contributing massively to that 5,000 total. And historically, this growth began after World War II, when surplus military aircraft were converted into civilian use, creating the first wave of commercial airlines. Then jet engines in the 1960s expanded long-distance travel, followed by deregulation in the 1980s, which allowed private companies to start airlines, leading to an explosion of new carriers, especially low-cost airlines like Southwest, Ryanair, and Eurasia. And today, startup airlines continue launching every year, especially in developing tourism markets, because aviation directly drives economic growth, employment, and global connectivity. But survival is extremely difficult, because airlines face razor-thin profit margins, high maintenance costs, strict safety regulations, pilot shortages, airport slot competition, and volatile fuel prices. Meaning for every successful airline, another quietly shuts down, and this constant cycle keeps the global airline count dynamic rather than fixed. So next time you hear the question, how many airlines exist? Remember, you are not asking for a number. You are asking for the size of an entire living ecosystem spanning continents, oceans, and economies. And the real magic of aviation is not that thousands of airlines exist, but that despite political borders, language barriers, and geographic distance, they all operate under shared international safety standards, allowing a passenger to travel across the planet using different airlines seamlessly within days, proving aviation is humanity's greatest cooperation project. And this is only the beginning, because in the next part we will explore which countries have the most airlines, and why some nations dominate the skies, while others rely on just a single national carrier. And once you understand that, you will never look at an airport departure board the same way again. If you think every country has roughly the same number of airlines, then prepare to be surprised, because the global aviation map is extremely unequal, and while some nations operate hundreds of carriers, others rely on only one national airline, and the reason is not simply wealth, but geography, politics, population size, tourism, demand, and transportation infrastructure all working together to shape how crowded a country's skies become. So let's begin with the world's undisputed aviation giant, the United States, where more than 500 certified airline operators exist, making it the country with the highest number of airlines on Earth. And this happens because America is enormous, with thousands of cities separated by huge distances, deserts, mountains, forests, and oceans, meaning aviation is not optional, but essential. And beyond major airlines like American Airlines, Delta, and United, the country hosts a massive network of regional carriers, cargo airlines, private charter companies, air taxi operators, medical evacuation services, firefighting, aircraft contractors, and Alaskan bush operators, each officially counted as an airline under the FAA, which dramatically increases the total. And in fact, many passengers have unknowingly flown on regional airlines operating under major brand names, because a ticket bought from a large airline might actually be operated by a smaller partner, showing how complex airline counting becomes. And following the United States, countries like Canada, Russia, and Australia also have unusually high numbers of airlines, not because of population alone, but because of remote geography, where small aircraft connect isolated communities unreachable by road, especially in northern Canada, Siberia, and the Australian outback, where airplanes replace trains, buses, and sometimes even ambulances. While in contrast, small European nations like Luxembourg or Malta may have only one or two airlines, since high-speed rail and short driving distances reduce the need for domestic aviation. However, Europe overall still hosts hundreds of airlines because of dense international travel and tourism demand, particularly low-cost carriers such as Ryanair, EasyJet, and Wizz Air, which expanded aggressively after deregulation, allowing almost any qualified company to start an airline. And this European low-cost revolution reshaped global aviation by proving millions of people would fly if ticket prices dropped dramatically, leading to the creation of dozens of new airlines across the continent, and spreading to Asia, where countries like Indonesia and the Philippines naturally developed many domestic airlines due to their geography consisting of thousands of islands requiring constant air connections, because ferries alone cannot meet demand. While India is currently experiencing rapid airline growth as its middle class expands and air travel becomes affordable, causing new carriers to launch to serve previously unconnected cities. And then we look at the Middle East, where interestingly the number of airlines is smaller, but their global influence is massive, because nations like the UAE, Qatar, and Turkey focus on powerful hub airlines such as Emirates, Qatar Airways, and Turkish Airlines, designed not to connect domestic cities, but to connect the entire world through strategic geographic positioning, turning deserts into international crossroads. While Africa presents a different story, where many countries maintain only a single national airline due to economic challenges, infrastructure costs, and regulatory barriers. Yet, regional and bush operators, still increase the continental total, quietly serving humanitarian missions, medical transport, and remote access. And another fascinating factor influencing airline numbers is government policy, because in some nations, aviation is heavily regulated, allowing only a state airline, while in others, open competition encourages dozens of startups, and this is why Southeast Asia saw a boom of low-cost carriers after liberalization policies similar to Europe decades earlier, and the numbers also fluctuate because airlines constantly merge for survival. For example, several European carriers disappeared into larger airline groups, while in other regions, new airlines appear to capture tourism demand, showing the airline count is not static, but breathing, constantly changing, like a living organism, reacting to economic climate, fuel prices, wars, pandemics, and technology. And perhaps most surprising is that population alone does not predict airline count, because some densely populated countries have few airlines, while sparsely populated nations have many due to terrain isolation and reliance on aviation, proving the Sky Network reflects geography more than demographics, and this reveals an important truth: aviation develops wherever distance creates barriers and disappears where ground transport replaces it. And in the next part, we will go even deeper beyond countries and explore different types of airlines, including passenger, cargo, charter, government, and private operators, to understand why the total number of airlines becomes so massive that the sky is far busier than most travelers ever imagine. And once you realize how many categories exist, you will understand why no single number can ever perfectly answer the question of how many airlines exist in the world. When most people think of airlines, they picture large passenger jets with logos of famous brands soaring across continents. But the truth is that airlines come in an incredible variety of types, and each type contributes to the total number of airlines globally in ways most travelers never notice, and understanding these categories is key to realizing why over 5,000 airlines exist worldwide and how aviation truly functions as a global ecosystem. So let's start with the most familiar type, the scheduled passenger airline, which includes both full-service carriers like British Airways, Singapore Airlines, and Lufthansa that operate intercontinental networks, and low-cost carriers like Ryanair, AirAsia, and Southwest Airlines that focus on affordable, regional, or international travel. These airlines dominate headlines and airport terminals. Yet they represent only a fraction of total airline operators, because beyond them exist regional airlines that fly shorter domestic routes, connecting small towns or islands, often using smaller aircraft, such as turboprops, and regional jets, allowing people in remote or less populated areas to access the national or international network. And then there are cargo airlines, which move trillions of dollars worth of goods every year, and without which global trade would collapse. Companies like FedEx, OBSDH, El Cargolax, and Atlas Air operate fleets of freighters that often fly at night and are completely invisible to most travelers, yet each cargo airline is fully certified and counted among global airlines and beyond. Passenger and cargo carriers, we have charter airlines, which provide flights on demand for holiday makers, sports teams, film crews, or corporate clients. And these airlines may operate seasonally or irregularly, meaning they often fly only when booked, making them invisible in traditional airline rankings, but essential for tourism and business travel in many regions. And another fascinating category is government and state airlines that operate aircraft for presidents, ministers, and official delegations, and sometimes for military purposes or humanitarian missions, which are fully licensed carriers and technically add to the airline total. Yet they never appear in commercial booking systems. And then we have private jet operators or air taxi services, a fast-growing sector serving business executives, wealthy clients, medical evacuations, or emergency transport. And these operators often have only a few aircraft, but are officially certified airlines under international aviation authorities, showing that airline numbers do not depend on fleet size, but on certification and operation legality. And some airlines exist only temporarily, or as subsidiaries under larger airline groups. For example, Lufthansa Group controls Lufthansa, Swiss, Austrian Airlines, Brussels Airlines, and Europe, each counted separately, although many share administrative systems, staff, and branding, while American Airlines regional operations like Envoy, Air, or P. Airlines further illustrate this hidden complexity, and in addition to these categories, the aviation industry includes specialized carriers such as Bush Airlines in Alaska and Africa, providing essential services to communities without roads, humanitarian aviation operators, flying supplies to conflict zones or disaster areas, aerial firefighting aircraft, and offshore transport airlines servicing oil rigs and remote facilities, all of which are officially registered as airlines, but largely invisible to the general public. And when you consider all these types together, it becomes clear why the total number of airlines is staggering, because each category serves a different function, faces unique regulations, and adapts to geographic, economic, and demographic demands, creating a constantly shifting aviation landscape. And the diversity of airline types also explains why some countries have fewer but larger airlines, while others have many smaller carriers, showing the difference between volume and variety. And historically, this diversity has grown with aviation technology, because the introduction of jets, turboprops, regional aircraft, cargo, and more recently, drones and business jets has allowed more specialized operators to exist safely and profitably, meaning the world's airline count is not static, but a dynamic network reflecting human mobility, commerce, emergency response, tourism, and government needs. And this complexity is why no single list or number can fully capture global aviation, and why each time you walk through an airport or check a flight schedule, you are only seeing the tip of a massive iceberg of airline activity, silently shaping economies, connecting people, and sustaining the global system of transportation. And in the final part, we will tie everything together. Explore how this massive airline ecosystem works as one interconnected system, the future trends shaping airline numbers, and leave you with a powerful perspective on just how extraordinary it is that thousands of airlines keep the world moving every single day. As we reach the final part of this deep exploration into the world's airlines, it's important to step back and see the sky not just as empty space, but as a complex network of thousands of airlines, each with its own purpose, history, and role in connecting humanity, because from tiny bush operators delivering medicine to remote villages to global giants like Emirates and Delta, carrying millions of passengers across continents, every airline contributes to a living ecosystem that enables trade, tourism, cultural exchange, humanitarian aid, and emergency services. And what is truly remarkable is how these airlines, despite their diversity, operate under shared international standards and regulations, coordinated by organizations like the International Civil Aviation Organization, ICAO, and the International Air Transport Association, IATA, ensuring safety, efficiency, and interoperability across borders, while adapting to local conditions, national policies, and market demand. And looking ahead, the future of airlines promises even more fascinating developments, because technological innovation is reshaping aviation from electric aircraft, hybrid engines, and autonomous systems to sustainable aviation fuels and carbon reduction strategies, meaning airlines of the future may be cleaner, quieter, and more efficient, while still maintaining the vast global network we rely on today. And economic trends also influence airline numbers, because emerging markets, growing middle classes, and expanding tourism create demand for new carriers, while economic crises fuel price fluctuations, geopolitical conflicts, and pandemics may cause others to merge, downsize, or cease operations, demonstrating the dynamic and fragile nature of aviation as a global industry. And yet, despite all these challenges, the resilience of airlines is remarkable, as history has repeatedly shown, with new carriers rising where others fall, innovations creating opportunities where there were obstacles, and human ingenuity ensuring that even the most remote communities remain connected to the wider world through flight and beyond economics and technology. There is a human story behind every airline, because millions of pilots, cabin crew, engineers, ground staff, air traffic controllers, and administrative personnel work tirelessly to keep these networks safe and functional every single day, often unseen and uncelebrated, yet vital to the lives of billions of people, goods, and services that depend on aviation, showing that airlines are not merely businesses but lifelines and bridges, connecting humanity across the globe. And in the final perspective, the sheer number of airlines, over 5,000 globally, represents more than just planes and logos. It represents the ingenuity, cooperation, and persistence of humans striving to shrink distance and bring the world closer together while constantly adapting to the challenges of geography, politics, economics, and technology. And so, the next time you check the departure board, book a ticket, or gaze at planes crossing the sky, remember that each aircraft is part of an intricate web of thousands of airlines, each contributing to a vast living organism that keeps the world connected. And this realization should not only inspire awe, but also gratitude for the invisible network working tirelessly above us and below the surface of commerce, governance, and human connection. Because, in understanding how many airlines exist, what types they are, which countries host them, and how they function together, we glimpse the incredible achievement of human aviation and the promise of a future where skies are more connected, sustainable, and resilient than ever before, proving that the story of airlines is not just a tale of numbers, but a testament to human ambition, cooperation, and the unstoppable desire to explore, connect, and transcend borders and distances. And this is the power of the skies, the magnitude of aviation, and the extraordinary truth behind the question, how many airlines exist in the world, leaving you with a profound perspective on the invisible yet indispensable forces that allow humanity to fly, connect, and thrive across every corner of the globe.